Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Hounslow Health and Wellbeing Board. I'm Councillor Lily Bath, and I'll be chairing the meeting. And I chair the meeting because I'm the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, Public Health and Health Integration. So I'd like to welcome you all today, and just to remind you before we do introductions that we do film this meeting. So just a reminder, as we normally do. So if I go to my right, if we can do some introductions, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm Jane Medici. I'm the Democratic Services Officer.
I'm Stephen Forsden, the Executive Director for Children's and Adult Services here at the Council.
I'm Claire Gom, Principal Strategist in the Public Health Team.
Dr. Amit Gupta, Hounslow Borough Medical Director.
Kasturi Ravindran, Insight Lead within the Policy and Insight team.
Mark Blomfield, Senior Joint Commissioning Manager.
Peter Golding, Chair, Healthwatch, Hounslow. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Manjinder Bhatti, Head of Partnerships, North West London, ICB.
Hi, Sheena Busnaik, Managing Director for West Middlesex Hospital.
Claire Miller, Deputy Director of Clinical Services for West London Trust.
Sterling Rippey, Principal Public Health Strategist.
Martin Waddington, Director of Joint Commissioning and Borough Director for Hounslow for the ICB.
Thank you all and welcome again. In terms of apologies, I've had apologies from Dr. Christopher Hilton, and I've had apologies for lateness from Councillor Chowdhury. But apart from that, I haven't had any other apologies. Okay, all right. In that case, if we can then move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 14th of July. It also actually includes, does it include minutes of the 2nd of September? Yes, it does. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So if we can go for accuracy first, if we do, I'm just going to the pages. Okay, page 7 on my agenda. Is there anything there that is wildly inaccurate? No. Page 8, page 9, page 10, 11, 12, 13, page 14. That's it. So if I don't think anybody has sort of suggested there's anything inaccurate, so if I can sign those off as an accurate record, thank you. And then if we move on to minutes, matters arising from the minutes, sorry. The first thing I've got is under item 4, which was around the self-referrals pathway on the health and wellbeing strategy. That is actually on the agenda, so we can cover that when we come to that. Item 6, I've got an action. No, item 6, I haven't. Item 7, there was a action around the autism plan, and Dr. Christopher Hilton and Helen. Chris is obviously not here, so I don't know whether we can put that on hold and get further feedback later. And then there's another item 8. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I suppose I should have made it clear that I'm attending on behalf of Chris, who says absence. So we have been given some in-year money. It's not concurrent, it's not ongoing, but it should. We're looking at doing some subcontracts with providers that we've previously been working with to look at the 52-week, those adults and children autism, to get them down from the 52 weeks and further down into those listings. It's a reasonable amount of money, so we should be in a better position in time, because it all takes time to work its way through the system. But that's very positive for us.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really good news. So hopefully that will bring down the assessment times. Yeah. That's excellent. Thank you. Item 8 was around. It must have been some follow up from the carers presentation around carers, and again I don't know whether Peter or, yeah, Peter, have you got an update?
Yeah, we haven't had any contact from Christopher, so maybe Claire could sort of facilitate that. We're more than happy to have a further discussion. If you look at the minutes, we detailed some of our concerns around the autism plan, etc. And so we can take that offline to close that action outside this meeting.
Thank you for that. And I don't have any further items from the last agenda, the last meeting, unless anybody else has. If no, okay, brilliant. Let's move on then. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview about all of the agenda items that we have tonight here, or this afternoon. Agenda item 3, 4 and 5 all relate to projects or activities that are funded, not maybe partially or wholly from the Better Care Fund. So this will give you some kind of idea about exactly what that money is used, because you know at every meeting I ask you to sign off the Better Care Fund. This is a bit of an overview of what exactly that means. So hopefully you'll find that useful. So moving on, we've got an update from Nardine.
It's actually from me.
Oh, it's actually from you, sorry, yeah, around the domiciliary care. And it's about the domiciliary care that we provide to residents. And it's for your information, really, but obviously we'll have some discussion and take questions after the presentation. Over to you then, Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. So those of you who attend regularly, as Councillor Bath has said, one of the main responsibilities of the Health and Wellbeing Board is to sign off the Better Care Fund. On the whole, you sign it with good faith without us going into the details. So I thought in this meeting, we will go into some of the detail around some of the key projects. So one of the key projects for Hounslow to support our residents, our most vulnerable residents, is our domiciliary care offer, the Hounslow Home Care offer. It's an 8-year contract. It is there to provide stability. This council is a London Living Wage payer. Stephen, I, the NHS are all very supportive of making sure that domiciliary care is a key part of our services. So we have an 8-year contract. It was 4 + 3 + 1. It was very much about developing a partnership with providers, making them a key part of the system. So we have 16 individual contracts, 6 main providers and 10 select provisions. So on the whole, we try and get purchase care from those 6 main providers. Those are the ones we engage with predominantly. The volume of work goes through them, and we work with them on a really regular basis to make sure they're delivering the care that we need for our residents. All providers, in some councils, providers provide per area. In Hounslow, they provide across the whole location. We designed the contract like that because that's what providers asked for. They said that's how they can deliver care at the best, and it's shown that it did work. It does work. We use a system called CM2000. So every time a carer goes into somebody's house, they register their arrival, and when they depart, they register their departure. This isn't to track the carers to just ensure performance, but it's to make sure that we're aware of any safeguarding. So if care isn't provided, we're informed, but it does mean that we have a tight grip on the providers as well. As I said, we're a London Living Wage payer. So if I move on to the next slide, I think there's some really interesting data on this next slide for those of you who are interested in data. So what has this produced? Well, sorry for the size of this, I hope you can see it, but one of the things we were really clear about, so what electronic monitoring tells us is how many visits are cut short. So anything that is less than 66% of the time provided, we consider that to be cut short. You might say that's quite low, but so on that indicator, if you look again, our performance is really high. So most people are above 80%, some are 100%. There are a couple of ambers on there. But on this whole, we're really assured that our carers go in and provide the length of time needed, which I think is important to know. And again, if we get data saying that they're leaving early regularly, we find out, is it because the family carer asked them to leave? Have they got an alternative? If not, we escalate it to Stephen and the care team to go and do an assessment to find out what is happening. So it is a very good indicator. The next one, I'm not going to go through all of them because I hope you've all had a time to read, but so just a basic one. We wanted all care providers to log their care. And to be up at the rate that we are, 90%, is really incredible. So when we started the contract, we were down at 20, 30%. So we didn't really know who was going into people's homes, how long they were staying, etc. We now have that data, and we know that on the whole, our residents are getting the care that we are commissioning and provided. I think the one that you'll all look to on the right-hand side is the continuity of worker. So, you know, as a principle, we think the more regular the carer that goes into someone's home, the better, the more they understand it, the more personalised care. That again shows something around the workforce. So some care agencies are down to 50%, 70, 70%. So that's an area that we are always talking to providers about, and what can we do to make sure that carers can provide more regular care to individuals. I'll pause for a second there. I'm not going to go through everyone, but anyone looking at that, I want to ask a question around a specific area? Lovely. You know where I am if you do later on. So the last thing I'd like to just bring to your attention is, so what does it mean being a London Living wage payer and having an 8-year contract? Well, I'm pleased it's really good news. If you look, CQC do independent assessments of our care providers, and if you can see, they're all rated good across the system at a time where you've all heard from COVID onwards the challenge in the care system has issues like that. We're very proud to be a council that has a council and health system that has good rated care providers. Lastly, why is it important that the council and the NHS work together? So within this contract, medication administration is delivered at times by the care providers as and when needed. This avoids duplication with district nurses. We've got clear guidance in place. We work very closely with Claire and the team to ensure that works well. But our care providers are trained to provide medication. We have an out-of-hours service, so we work with Sheena and the team to make sure that during the weekends, during bank holidays, during Christmas, we always have care provision available for the NHS to ensure clear and quick discharge from hospitals. Over the last 6 months, Manjinder, Sheena, Stephen and Claire and others have all been working to improve bridging care, which is a form of domiciliary care to get people out of hospital quickly. We have the hospital home initiative, and all of these initiatives have been developed with the domiciliary care providers because we have a strong relationship with them. They know who we are. They know what we expect. They're as committed to our residents as we are. So I think that strong partnership is a real strength in Hounslow. I think it's the importance of the Better Care Fund. It's a jointly commissioned thing between the council and the NHS. Any questions?
No. Thank you, Martin. That's a very good overview. And I'm really pleased to see that obviously all the providers are good. I think that is a good thing, obviously. But I think you've sort of reassured us with the CM 2000. Is that what it's called? I think that's a really good system to have in place, because if someone does have a particular complaint about the quality of care or the number of times that they were visited or not visited, we could verify that. So I think that's a really important sort of aspect of it. No, anybody, any questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you very much. Oh yeah, Claire.
My only question would be about the two the two agencies that show requires improvement in well-led. How far are they along with their action plans to improve that? Do you know?
No, that's a very good question. So we have met with them both. They now have an action plan, so they've developed an action plan,
Okay.
and now it's implementing and monitoring that action plan.
So just to follow on from that, I guess in terms of the continuity of care workers, that's probably obviously a national problem. Is that anything further we can do? I know it's a difficult area, isn't it, in general, nationally, but is there anything further we can do with the providers?
So we carry on working with the providers. We try and understand what those issues are. I think you're correct. It is a national issue. I can find out more the detail behind that, but I think the turnover of care staff is one issue, but also the rostering and ensuring. I mean, there are many care staff who have at times to go to the same client at the same time. They can't do both, so other people have to cover. It's whether you sort out a roster for your care staff or for the residents. If all the residents want the same care at 5 o'clock, you can't be in all places at once. So it's a bit of a mix of that one, Councillor. I think it's very hard to be green in that area.
Yeah. Although there is one, isn't there, agency that is green, having looked at it. So it'll be quite interesting to see what they are doing. But yeah, it might be a smaller outfit. I don't know. Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, then I think we'll move. Thank you very much for that, Martin. That was very helpful. So the next part of our agenda is agenda item 4, and this is around extra care. And obviously, this is just as important as well for our residents, those that need to be as independent as possible. And Mark is going to give us a summary on what it is, basically, and what we actually provide. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for inviting me along to speak about this. And I have another item after this. So I hope it will keep you entertained. So I commission supported housing and preventative services, and I'm part of the joint commissioning team, which is funded through the Better Care Fund. And one of our most important projects is the delivery of extra care. I'm hoping I'm going to press the right button here. Is it the red one at all? And next one, yes. So we've got a couple of slides. I won't read through everything, but extra care is a great solution for people who are either frail and older, or people who are disabled, either physically disabled or have learning disabilities. And it provides a really high quality accommodation. So really an apartment, a self-contained apartment of a very good standard in general. And but there's care and support on site 24 hours a day. So you have the benefits of residential care, but you also have the independence of having a key to your own door and your own home. So the outcomes for people living in extra care tend to improve when people move in, rather than deteriorate as they often do in more intensive care. So it's sort of the least restrictive, most independent type of accommodation for a certain segment of people who don't require residential care but have substantial needs. So traditionally, it's for people who are over 55, but in Hounslow, we're an ambitious borough and we're an innovative borough, and we have spread that definition to people over the age of 18 who have physical or learning disabilities. In one of our schemes, in Bristol Court scheme, which is the most recent scheme that we've developed. And that's been a real success. We've seen really good integration across the ages and really good outcomes for some of our most vulnerable residents. And everybody has their own care plan, so it's tailored to their needs and meeting their person-centered outcomes. And the reason we're talking about it here today is because it's partially funded through the Better Care Fund. And that's principally to meet the outcomes of the Better Care Fund in terms of avoiding or delaying the need for residential care, preventing hospital admissions, and supporting the fast discharge from hospital. So part of the schemes that they work with and what the funding sort of contributes towards is so that those schemes can work well with our dedicated GPs who like our care homes, but unlike other boroughs, we stretch this into extra care. So there's a dedicated GP for each of the schemes. Obviously, people have the choice to sign up or not, but generally people choose to be with that dedicated GP, and he has a relationship with the people who work in the scheme and the support workers, the care workers. They also work alongside the West London Trust Care Homes team and the ICRS and the pre-hospital ambulance support team to prevent people being taken to hospital unless they absolutely need to be. And we have a variety of activities happening at the schemes, including Healthy Hands Low, so they visit regularly. And we have activities to tackle social isolation and to improve people's health and well-being. Of course, it's here. And so we have, just to say, we've got 4 existing schemes across the borough, and that map sort of shows that they're relatively well spread throughout the borough. But we have 201 units currently, so 201 flats, 201 people at any one time. But we have very great ambitions around extra care and Hounslow, because not only are the outcomes better for the people who live there, it's also more cost effective for the public purse. So if you compare the price of residential care, it's much more expensive than extra care. So as part of our program, we plan to develop 200 new units of extra care over the next 10 years. So that's doubling the capacity. And we've made good progress on this. So the picture on the slide shows a site which we are planning to develop the first of those schemes. So it's been to our cabinet and been approved that we'll develop the Neen Garden scheme, which with a registered housing provider who's an expert in this field, who we're already working with, they're all good on the CQC, but so a good provider who also builds and develops schemes. So we're planning a 50-unit scheme here for our older adult population, and it's an integrated scheme whereby the people who are delivering, who are your landlords, are also your care provider, so that people have an integrated service, and that also stacks up better financially for the public purse. We're also exploring the possibility of having some step down beds from, not beds, so flats in there. So we find that sometimes people end up being placed in residential care as a temporary solution and then they end up staying there. We would much rather that if they get stepped down into extra care, that they end up staying there, because it's a better solution for them and more cost effective for the public purse. So we're exploring that at the moment. And then further along that pipeline of activity for 200 units, we're also planning a larger scheme, more similar to the Bristol Court scheme, where it's mixed age of people over the age of 18 with disabilities, because we have a large demand for younger adults with learning disabilities and physical disabilities, also people maybe who've experienced brain injuries. It's a really good solution for them, where they get a really high quality place to live and care and support, and they can stay there for as long as they live, hopefully, until the end of life. So we're also exploring the possibility of developing more specific schemes for younger adults around mental health and learning disability, but that's further down the pipeline in terms of the schemes. So that's a little bit of an update of where we are with extra care and our plans, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Great overview, and obviously there's a great need for it, and hence we've obviously agreed at Cabinet for a scheme just recently. Peter, you had your hand up. Do you have a question?
Thank you very much indeed. Building upon what the chair has just said, there's a great demand. What you haven't alluded to is what the actual demand is. We know there's 200. We know you've got 50 subject to the finalisation of the development. And then we got things we are exploring. But what is the demand, and therefore what is the current gap that we've got?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a while before some of these innovative plans are going to come to fruition.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you. So all our current schemes are full, and we have waiting list for some of them, particularly the younger adults. And we've done an extensive piece of mapping and demand projections with our performance team and our finance team. So we have a big spreadsheet projecting what the placements are into various different types of accommodation, supported living, residential care, domiciliary care. So on the high end of domiciliary care, it's actually more cost effective to place somebody in extra care. So we look at all those factors and our projections for them going forward. And that's where we came to the figure of 200 over the next 10 years, because that's our projected demand over that time. And there are various different client groups. So we do have a strong demand for younger adults with learning disabilities and mental health. And that's why we're exploring those more bespoke schemes, but also we know there's a lot of demand at the moment for younger adults with learning disabilities in our current Bristol Court scheme. So basically, we've done the projections, we've looked at the costings. That's the most, based on the projections, we come to that figure and the mixture of the type of need that we need to fill.
And is there anything further we can do, subject to finance is always a problem, of speeding up that 200? Because whilst we're waiting for that, you still got this big demand, and we've got people who haven't got a provision, or they're in the wrong sort of expensive provision than they need to be.
Yeah. So we've got quite a long history of developing these schemes. So I was involved in the developing of the last 3 of these schemes, and you don't want them all to come along at the same time, because people's needs change. So particularly the older frail population, they can't be, there's only they coming down the pipeline in terms of getting older and getting more frail in the future, but they're not there yet. So we need to stagger the opening of the schemes in terms of the demand. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to fill them. So if we've looked at, we're confident we can fill the 50 unit scheme in 2018-19 when it comes online. And then 2 years later, we're confident we can fill another 70 unit scheme of mixed age. And then we think actually for the learning disability and the mental health ones, we could bring them along a bit earlier, but we need to do work on the development of the service specification for them and getting that exactly right, because that's a bit more innovative. And we have done work like that before, but again, it takes a lot of work to assess those people, work with their families, get them ready to move in. So I suppose the only thing that can help, we don't want them all to come along at the same time, but what could help is additional capacity. And some of that work, we're working with social workers to make sure they're thinking of these options, make sure they're working with families to get them ready to move in, to share with them what a good offer it can be.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just have a follow-up. But developing the service specification for that latter group is really important, because if funding did become available at some point, you might be ready to go. Absolutely. That's separate from assessing a client that may need to go in there, sure. But this is about the specification of what you actually need to build and develop, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're working on that at the moment. So I have a meeting tomorrow to talk to colleagues in adult social care about how that looks.
Thank you for the question, Peter. I'm just going to bring in Stephen, who wants to respond as well.
It's just to emphasise what Mark said. Whilst in essence, in numbers, it would look good if we could have them now, because if I look to the numbers, we've got about 320 people in residential care, about 230 odd in nursing care. The nature of the client group will change. So we're looking to this in the long term. So if I look at our nursing care provision at the moment, what we've identified is we've got a growing number of people with acquired brain injury within that population who are currently in nursing care because there is no alternative. That number will likely grow over the next 10 to 15 years, just by the nature that our colleagues in the NHS and medics find ways to keep people alive who would have, in essence, suffered injuries and would not have survived. And that will change over the period of time. And as Mark says, again, learning disabilities, I've been around for a long, long time. We used to spend about 15% of our budget on people with learning disabilities, because the vast majority of people with learning disabilities didn't live beyond 35 to 40. They now live into their 50s, 60s and 70s, and I guess in the next 10 years, some will live into their 70s and 80s. So the pacing of this needs to also change with the inherent population need, and that will encourage, we will build these, I think as Mark said, fairly flexibly. So they'll meet a whole range of needs. It's the delivery of the service inside the scheme that matters in terms of the service specification to meet the needs that are going to emerge in the next 10 years. Because what we don't want to find is we're, like we have with people acquired brain injury, had no alternative but nursing care for them because there is no other provision for them. So we want to have a look at that population in the next year or two to work out whether or not actually, as I've said to Mark and Martin, one of those schemes has a specialist unit for those individuals. But that's yet to be worked out. And there'll be other population groups coming up who we probably need to plan out in the next 2 to 5 years for the last batch in 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. I've got another question here, Dr. Amit.
This time, I was just going to ask whether each of the units are designed by their nature to be single occupancy or whether they have to consider the potential for multiple occupancy and how you manage the challenge around planning that potentially.
Yes, that's a very good question. So we have a mixture of the majority are single occupancy, but we do have two bedroom apartments as well. And we've worked with the ratio of that over time. Initially, I think when extra care was initially developed, they thought there would be a lot of 2-bedroom needs, couples traditionally needing their own room. We've got that down to about, we think it's about 5 or 10% maximum that we need in terms of that. So yes, we do offer 2-bedroom properties as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think this is a very positive story. Thank you. I think just seeing the pipeline of what's coming, depending on what our population needs, is really important. My question really was, it says may include some step down. Is that, will that be confirmed soon, or is that sort of still up in the air because you're still planning? Stephen's looking. This is good. I mean, you know me, I'll want it tomorrow, but you're right. You've got to plan for the next generation of the need for the population. So I think it was just a question, but I'm glad to see it. I think it's needed, and it just shows that we're thinking about the future.
So I think there can be issues with step down accommodation in extra care, and we have had problems in the past where people have got where it hasn't been managed effectively, and people have ended up staying there when they could have gone back home. So we need to make sure the processes are right, and we need to make sure it all stacks up. Also, we need to make sure that the provider is holding. It's very complex. You've got council tax, you've got furniture, you've got deep cleans, you've got electricity and gas, because these are people's independent flats. So generally, moving straight from hospital into extra care isn't really an option, because it's like moving home. It's not like moving into a residential care home where everything's looked after for you. But so we need to, develop the model, make sure everybody's happy with that and the funding. But it's something we're definitely exploring.
Great, thank you. Martin?
So thanks, Shane. And I think, you know, the importance of how we do things in Hounslow, the importance of having a joint commissioning team is Mark is here to support the NHS and the council. So in that development, and in answer to Peter's question, you know, the council really does struggle for land. So the pace of delivering these isn't just about the spec, it's making sure we get the land, we prioritise it. So, you know, again, we're really pleased the council prioritises extra care here. Then when it comes to the design of the spec, of course, we'll work with you, the hospital team, Claire, social care, and Amit and primary care to ensure that what we design is a whole system approach to looking after vulnerable people in our community. So things like step down, we will try and achieve it with everybody's input, but making sure everyone's also aware of the barriers and the difficulties of doing this. So, you know, I think what this demonstrates is system thinking, but it's quite hard to meet the needs of everybody. That's why we need to come together, have these conversations, know you're developing them, and then work out how we find the solutions.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a really good discussion, and thank you for the presentation. Obviously, as elected members, myself and Councillor Chowdhury, we have lots of discussions around extra care housing. We would also like them straight away, but we're aware that, you know, there's a huge amount of work being done in the background and meetings, and And as Martin alluded, finding obviously land is always an issue, but it's a massive commitment for us as a council, and I'm always really pleased to see that we are pushing ahead as far as we can, and also being mindful of the need in the future, but not just now. So thank you very much for that, Mark. And if no further questions, comments, I think we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which I think is you again, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, over to you again.
Thank you.
And another really important a hospital discharge pilot project, which you're going to give us more information and update on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So yeah, when Martin asked me to come and present about extra care, I said, can I present about this this project as well, which is a real sort of pet project of ours in terms of I think it shows how in joint commissioning we do think in as a whole system way and try to bring together health, social care and the voluntary sector. So I'll go through these slides quite quickly. They were developed with Dr. Emma Rollinson, who I'm sure many of you are aware of, but she's a wonderful partner to have in the hospital because she has very interested in the community, and she's done this MBA and apprenticeship research project about the role of the voluntary sector as it relates to hospitals. So she's been great to work with, and she's identifying, like us, that people are in hospital, they sometimes fall through the cracks. The hospitals are stretched and dealing with social issues, which isn't the best use of their time. And then there's a voluntary sector out here who have a great potential, and it's a matter of trying to link those things together at the right time, at the right place for the right people. So, and I come from a background of working in housing and working with the voluntary sector and trying to bring the housing and the voluntary sector into the sort of BBP whole systems working, and always thinking in a preventative way. So this triangle is something that we like to represent. So at the top of it, you have the hospital, which is probably the most expensive place to be, and the place that people don't really want to be, but have to be at certain times. And ideally, we're moving people down to much more independent solutions, which are also much better value for money. So that sort of this idea of linking the voluntary sector and helping people to get discharged from hospital sooner is something that I've always been keen on exploring. And then we commission things like supported housing and floating support. So floating support in particular is person-centered support. So it's not care. So we're not doing washing, feeding, and manual handling with people, but helping them to sort out their lives, get back on the right track in terms of paying their rent, maybe exploring what they're doing with their daytime, getting a job if that's what they want to do, but also predominantly working out housing issues and keying them into other things, which is going to address their other social issues, maybe drug or alcohol, domestic violence and things like this. So we started talking about this project some time ago and actually went live just under a year ago in November. We only had 9 months funding, but then we went to the CW Plus charity and we put in a bid. Well, Emma put in a bid supported by us, and we managed to get funding to bring us through to the end of the year. And as it says in the slide, it's about using the voluntary sector better. It's about filling in the gaps in the system and about health equality. So improving the quality of work for people working in the hospital, because this is a real frustration for people, but most importantly, the outcomes for the vulnerable patients involved. So the approach is to have a targeted approach and sort of bridging the community into the hospital, but it's focusing really on the support in the voluntary sector. And linking them into these services on the right-hand side, which are some of the statutory, like the housing teams. We've got housing link workers, making sure they're dealing with people's housing issues, but also straight into floating support, just helping people with their debt, their mental health issues, and their loneliness. So it's for people who are over 18 and who aren't eligible for adult social care, but do have needs. So they're likely PO1, PO0 and PO1 patients, and it's, yeah, as I said, providing a sort of a holistic support to those people around their needs. What it isn't is it's not a transport service. It's not a registered care service. It's not a shopping service. Those sorts of things. It's not doing those sorts of things with people. And essentially what the pilot is we've got one targeted support worker. So they work in our the local authority communities division, and they link people into the voluntary sector. That's their role, this community solutions, this community hub, this localities approach that the council has. So one person who works for the council, but also an additional floating support worker who's dedicated to these patients and can pick them up immediately and work with them in their own home. So somebody in the hospital, but also somebody in the community that's visiting them at home and helping them to sort out their issues in their own accommodation. Another benefit to this is we've got a virtual sort of team that works around it. So underneath it shows the MDT working. So it's working with housing, it's working with adult social care, it's working with the high intensity user coordinator, and they meet on a regular basis on a Teams call to sort of problem solve very complex social cases. And so we've looked at some of the data. It's quite early days at the moment. There's some information there about age, ethnicity. We're probably not reaching as broad an ethnic group as we should, given the borough population. But the most interesting thing is around some work we've done, and this isn't an exact science, but about bed days, about emergency admissions, and about ED admissions. So ideally, we have a control group, but it's almost impossible to get a control group for this population, because by definition, we just went in and found out who needed the support, and you can't really put that into a formula. But for the people we have supported, when you look at their activity before and after the intervention, you see that there's a big impact in terms of the so the ED attendances. Before was the average is 2.6, after is the average is 1.6, 1.59. And emergency admissions 1.5 on average for the 3 months before, and then the 3 months after 0.81. And probably most significantly, the bed days. So on average, this is the 3 months before and 3 months after. On average, 3 months before, they spent over 18.8 days in hospital, and afterwards 7 days in hospital. So it's not an exact science, but it gives us an indication that this is making significant impact. And if you just do some very crude calculations, I'm not saying this is what an exact science by any means, but if you just extrapolate that out by saving 11 bed days by the 54 patients that we're looking at here, and you multiply by a price for a bed day of 383, the savings there are £227,000 a year. And the cost for this service over the year was 118,000. And that's only a 3 month period. So that's not even the full year period. Again, it's not exact. And we have some more recent data on 4 months that we've just done, but I didn't get in time for the slides. And that's showing, again, over a longer period, but again, the same, if not better impact on bed days. So we've looked at it in terms of cutting the data in different ways. In terms of the highest impact is with our frail older patients, but across all ages, it has a very good impact. And we've looked at it in terms of frailty scores. Again, you'll see that the highest impact is the people who are the most frail. And not just sort of looking at wider outcomes, we've also surveyed the people that we've worked with 3 months after with a follow-up phone call, and where people had needs around finances. You'll see 62% are saying that their lives have improved in this area. And mental health, people who are identified as having those needs, 78% said that they had improved. And people who needed support around their independence, 78% again say that has improved. So the sort of softer outcomes as well. And there's a case study which sort of shows the multifaceted sort of support that is sort of engendered through this project, through such very practical issues like spare keys and getting in assistive technology, arranging for adaptations, sort of helping people to clean out their homes when there's sort of hoarding issues and things like that. apply for the benefits that they're entitled to and things that can keep them independent. And then we had a sort of celebratory event when we got the CW Plus grant at the hospital, and we used that to consult with our stakeholders there in the discharge hub and wider. And we got some really useful feedback on that to help us improve the service. So these are some of the things that came out of that event. So things like doing a staff survey, better ways to refine the data, and so on. So it's a great project that we're very proud of. The funding for it going forward isn't secured, which is the issue for us going forward. I think we can probably manage to keep it funding until April now at this stage, but really we think we could have a much bigger team and we could have a much bigger impact, but we'd need to find the funding from somewhere, and it's so difficult at the moment with the current funding environment that yeah, we're struggling to do that. But
Thank you, Mark. So you're not sure about the funding going forward from April, is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
When you were going through the presentation, I just had a question around demand. Is there a greater demand than what we actually are providing? Have you find that?
Yes. So,
Yeah.
so we've sort of limited the criteria to people. So we're not working with people at the emergency department. So we're only working with people who've already been admitted, and then we're only working with people in particular wards who are, you know, ambulatory care. I can't remember all the names for the wards, but Emma's on the ground and she tells us where to aim it. But there are further, we could spread it further to other wards, and we could bring it into the emergency department. So we're fending people off and helping them to not get admitted and to go back home with the support that they need, who wouldn't be entitled to necessarily under the Care Act, but might have substance misuse, homelessness, all those sort of challenging issues, social isolation, things like that.
I think the answer to your question at the front door is there is a demand. We try and do as much of the sort of do some of this at the front door, but not in a consistent way. So I think that's probably one that we need to have another look at, and especially around mental health. I think the ED teams do a lot of signposting around some of this stuff. So yes, we probably do need to spend a bit more time on it. Just thinking about how we
opportunity here, doesn't there? Because having previously been involved in that front door offer, never quite delivered the intention, but these guys clearly know more and more engaged in the community actual offers that's out there. So whether there's a different modelling of those posts that you have in the team.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, we do need to look at that in the sort of the current climate is going to be tricky funding everything, but we probably should put it on the table. Currently funded by the charity.
Yeah, I was also, I mean, I agree with you. It sounds like you could obviously at the front door would be really, I can see the real need for it. But I was also wondering about floating support. That's obviously sounds like a really good part of this project, because that does support people with all the other social problems that they have that aren't necessarily medical. They're just ending up in hospital. So I like that aspect of it. But it sounds like it's a great need, but we don't know what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about it is, so this is what we do. So we know the voluntary sector, we know about prevention and working in an early intervention way with people and working with the voluntary sector. So that's the great thing with Emma, with her knowledge of the hospital and the pinch points there. That has been a real synergy that's happened there, and I think we could make more of it. And floating support is a great offer because it visits people at home, it sees their home environment, it works with them around sort of, you know, some people who are quite challenging to work with, you know, who have don't always want that support or aren't open to it. They're very skilled in working those sort of issues and the more problematic areas of substance misuse and mental health problems and things who people who often end up back in hospital again quite regularly.
It would be interesting to also consider the children's part, because we have lots of returners. Sorry.
Chair, thank you very much indeed. Talking about the floating service, sorry, and I don't understand the details, but over the 7 months we dealt with 34. That seems quite a low number. compared to what the probable demand is, and therefore are we really sort of maximising what we're doing in the pilot as well as what else we might be able to maximise help in that area?
Yeah, so it was 54, but they're only the people that we can have had the support long enough so that we can show that they need to have had 3 months before and 3 months after, or 4 months before and 4 months after. So they've actually supported out well over 100 people. But absolutely, I think there is a lot more potential to support a lot more people, particularly if we opened it up into preventing hospital admission as well as getting people out more quickly.
And just, sorry, a quick follow-up. And helping more, is that just dependent upon getting more money to fund this rather than actually utilising what exists? Because there's a lot, you know, the council, hospitals, voluntary sector, they're already there to help people.
Yeah.
And it's a question of how we utilising them in the best way in this area.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So some of it is just connecting people with the right services, like, you know, cross-lights, debt prevention, things like that. But again, there's a lot of social prescribing going on. A lot of voluntary groups get prescribed into without any additional funding. So they're really stretched. And, you know, with all the national insurance increases and everything, the voluntary sector is under a massive amount of pressure. So there is that. But and we have a contract with Floating Support. It's a substantial one, but it's completely full. And it's also working in the Hounslow Care Together team, the new multidisciplinary team, the Test and Learn pilot. And the early findings from that is this floating support posts are really important, and they're making a real difference in that multi-agency working. So we can keep trying to stretch what we're funding in different directions, but eventually something has to give. So most of the floating support referrals come in from our adult social care front door. So they're preventing people who don't meet the social care criteria but are on the edge. Another thing that is really interesting with this project is, you know, the Merlin reports that come in from the police and from the ambulance workers about, they go into somebody's house and they find that, you know, there's a real issue with their housing situation. They'll send a Merlin report to adult social care. They'll send that report to the hospital worker to say, have a look at this patient, because we've seen their housing conditions are very bad. And that gives us an indication of who to target the support to. So I think there's even more work we could use the data information that we're already receiving from other agencies to say, these are the patients that really need that attention.
Thank you, Claire. I did stop you short, so please
don't
do come
worry.
in.
Thank you. It was slight a tangent in a way, in that just knowing what the challenge is at the UTC around the 0 to 4s and the repeat families that come, and often they're presenting as if with a medical condition, but again, often there is a whole social element to it, and whether or not that's another branch of development that could be more effective than some of the more medical thought-to solutions that we've had.
Yeah, I think so.
I was just going to say before I forget, I mean, fortunately haven't been to A&E for a while, but I just wondered, you know, you were talking about having some sort of, you know, resource there at the front door. Have you got lots, I know this sounds a bit, I'm sure you have you got lots of leaflets and things that people can pick up, like mental health support, or you know, or if you know, they want to know about family information service, anything like that?
Yeah, so we do. I think it's the traditional leaflets, and I think what this is showing is it's more of an intervention. So people do attend with lots of social issues, and they think that the ED front door is the one-stop shop that's going to resolve everything. And our issue is we don't have the capacity to manage any of that, but we do give out the traditional leaflets. They're not the same as this. I think that's the point I think Mark's trying to make. And Emma.
This might just be something that people are not aware of. They might connect them to other mental health services or something that are available. But yeah, Mark, did you want to say one final thing?
Yeah, so we're doing a bit of work with the hospital and Mark Jarvis about communication and having things on screen, information about what's available in the community. So just promoting that at the right place, and training for staff as well about understanding the council's localities approach and the voluntary sector across there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for, that's really, obviously really another really important project, and we'll see what happens in terms of funding, but thank you. Sounds like you're delivering a lot with this, with the resource that you've got, but yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Can we then move on to agenda item 5? No, sorry, we've just done that. Agenda item 6, which is the Better Care Fund. And as you know, at this meeting, I sort of ask you to approve the submission, and which is what I'm asking to do again. But do I have President? Okay, there you go. I'm looking in the wrong direction. Looking for you, Manjinder.
So Chair, but just before you, I think we as a committee should just give Manjinder a big thank you, because she does all the bureaucratic paperwork for the Better Care Fund to a gold standard. I come and ask you all to approve it, but she does all the work behind it. So yeah.
I'd like to formally thank you, and I'm not going to lie and say that I read it in great detail, but I do, and there's an awful lot of information in there, but it is presented really well. So yeah, that's great. Well done.
Thank you. So I think it's important to start with the fact that, so I'm one of the BCF care leads in Hounslow. The other one is Kitu Devaraja, who's the finance lead for adult social care and commissioning. So we both work on those returns together. So as Martin said, and you've just said as well, Chair, so essentially for BCF, it's an annual planning process. So that means at the beginning of the year, we do the whole plan for that coming year. And then each quarter, we do a quarterly submission based on the metrics and the expenditure. And then at the end of the year, we do the quarter four, and then there's an end of year report. So that's why you're always seeing some papers that are then ratified at this meeting. So the submission that I'm talking about today is the quarter one submission. So I've got there just the headings of the areas that are covered in this. And this year it was slightly different to previous years in that the metrics were changed. So nationally, 3 new metrics. Well, one of them isn't really new. Residential admissions has always been there, but emergency admissions and discharge delays is brand new. So the way that's calculated is new for us in the system. The national conditions remain the same. So the 4 there at the top have been the same national conditions for the past 4 or 5 years, and we continue to meet them. So there are no concerns to flag there. The expenditure for our quarter one return was as planned, so there was no variation to that plan. And we're currently working on the Q2 submission now. And again, there's no kind of concerns. We're spending as we expect to. It's a really tight budget, so it's a big value budget, but actually we control that really tightly to make sure that we're in line with that. So just to give a bit more details about the metrics then. So the so also just to say the BCF is about adults only. So it's, even though you can fund elements of children's services or roles, our BCF in Hounslow from a service perspective is mostly 18 plus, and all of the metrics here are around 18 plus adults as well. So emergency admissions, as I said, is one of the new metrics that was introduced this year. So it replaces a previous metric around avoidable admissions for ambulatory care. So it's slightly different, but it's more broader now for 65 plus. And what we had to report for this was if the planned performance for quarter one was met or not. And what we reported for this quarter was that the data was not available. And that's because for quarter one, the nationally published information was only 1 month. So we didn't have all 3 months. So we said it's not available. And then what they also offered us this year was an opportunity to update and refresh our forecast for this year based on the updated published data. So we took up that opportunity. So because we only had 5 months worth of data when the baseline was set, we updated the plan. So that's been done. So that gives us more confidence that we'll be in line with that performance when we report on quarter 2, 3, and 4. Discharge delays is again a new metric, and this is about, there's 2 kind of sub-metrics in this. So the first one is what proportion of our residents are discharged on their discharge ready date. So that's A. And then B is of those that are not discharged on that date, how many days do they exceed that date by? So is it by 1, 2, 3, or 4? And we put that we weren't on track to meet that goal for Q1, and that is such a shame because we were only down by 0.68 days for Hounslow Health and Wellbeing Board area. So we did meet the target in terms of the proportion of residents overall for Hounslow that were discharged on the discharge ready date, but we were, so say that average is about 5 days, and this is for all pathways, so 0, 1, 2, 3. We were only short by 0.68 days, so we had to put it that we didn't meet that target. So no concerns really though in terms of what the rest of the kind of planned performance for the rest of this year looks like. We also updated the performance for the rest of this year for that metric because again, the baseline was based on 4 months worth of data and now we have full 12 months, so that's been updated. And finally, residential admissions has stayed pretty consistent. This information doesn't come from any sort of nationally shared dashboard. This is based on Controx, so what the council uses locally. It's very reliable, it's very consistent. We do all our baselines based on that, and we did meet the goal for Q1 by quite a lot. And therefore we didn't update the future plan for the rest of this year on that because we are on track and that data was reliable, so the baseline was really reliable. Okay, so it's really handy I've got Sheena here today. So the second bit that we wanted to focus on was really the hospital discharge performance. And just to kind of distinguish, because I think it's really helpful what Mark had just updated before in terms of the front door work. So there's kind of four pathways we talk about when we talk about discharge. So pathway 0 is the kind of makes up half of all the discharges that when people go into hospital, what they'll be discharged with. So they may still have some kind of support needs, but they're not discharged with like a formal assessment of care or intermediate care services. So that's about 50% of all discharges. And then of the remaining 50%, they're divided into pathways 1, 2, and 3. So pathway 1 makes up the biggest cohort. That's about 45% of that 50%. And this means that all these people are going home with either an assessed social care package. It could be a brand new package. Often that's what it is because restarts and increases are kind of, that's usually considered a pathway 0. Or it's an intermediate care service. So it could be rehab, rehabilitation, or home first. It could be other services in the community, other health services that they might be referred to as well. And I think that's important to state here. So all of the information here that we're looking at as a spotlight is pathway 1 only. And again, for Hounslow, 80% of our pathway 1s are made up of discharges for those aged 65 plus. So really heavily thinking about the kind of older, frail cohort. So our pathway, so when we say delay days, we're talking about from the time the patient is medically optimized until the time they're discharged. So that's the definition of delay days. So for 24-25, our delay days target was 2.80 days. So that means we have that time that we need to, as soon as they're declared medically optimized, that we need to get them back home. And our actual performance for last financial year was 2.55 days. So this is purely Hounslow data, and this is based on Optica, which is the North West London system that we use for tracking all of the discharges. So we clearly did very well with that. I've put that there's an 18% improvement from our baseline data because in 23-24, when all of this kind of bridging care work first started, the baseline that we were working to at that time was 3.10 days. So it's a big improvement, and this year it's even more ambitious. So what we're looking at is a ceiling performance of 2.25 days. So quite a jump from last year, with a stretch target to get it down to 2 days if we can do that. And our Q1 performance today is 2.24 days, and that's a 28% improvement to the 3.10 delay days. So lots of hard work happening to get that down. And then what we are able to do in Hounslow is isolate what our performance for bridging care performance is. So just as a quick recap, so bridging care is the discharge model we put in place on the 1st of November 2023. And this is specifically to get patients home on pathway 1 as quickly as possible. And in Hounslow, we do it slightly differently from other neighbouring boroughs. So our bridging care offer consists of 3 streams. That is either a package of care. It's home first, which is 5-day kind of D2A therapy in the community. or it is a reablement, and that received additional investment because previously it was quite a tightly ring-fenced. So it's a really important provision, but really tightly ring-fenced how people could access that. So what we do with that is we make sure that people go home with the right service rather than solely relying on a package of care, which can create dependency. So when we isolate bridging care performance, our performance for last year was 1.68 days. And oh, sorry, I put Q4 average there. That was because we couldn't isolate the data in the previous months before that. So it's really good. So compared to our 2 days kind of stretch target, we know we are performing better than that when we isolate bridging care, and it's 1.50 days for our current Q1 performance. So when we think about all of our pathway 1 discharges in Hounslow, about 50% of them go home via a bridging care pathway. Anyone that goes home with a restart or package of care increase or a full care assessment or intermediate care or any other community referral, for example, MSK, neuro rehab, those are all the rest that make up where we then get to the 2.25 days. I hope this is clear. So bed days saved. So this is calculated when you isolate how many packages were, how many patients were discharged with a bridging package of care in that financial period. So last year full year and this year Q1, multiplied by either 1.68 or 1.50 days. So we've put the total bed days saved. So far, when you look at Q1 performance at 486, that's a really good start to Q1. It's where I'd expect us to be at. I would expect with the activity increasing in the winter and in the next couple of months, we would start to see that go even higher. And then the last two, so the first 4 are kind of non-cashable savings, but really good kind of system savings. But the last 2 lines are from a kind of resident patient perspective, which I think are really important to include as well. So because of the work that we do in Hounslow, what we have with our 3-pronged bridging care offer is that only 40% of those patients go on to receive a long-term package of care. And that's really, really important because what that means is that they're only discharged from the community service when they're able to cope, and they're not just stuck on a long-term package of care, which is not good for them in terms of independence outcomes, but also from the Hounslow system in terms of expense. And then also we weren't capturing this last year, but we've started to monitor it for 25-26. Of the patients that go home with a 5-day home first therapy service, only 64% are referred onwards to a community, for example, community recovery service or an intermediate care service. Again, that's really important because we offer home first for up to 5 days, so it's more holistic and longer term. But also we know that our intermediate care services are under a lot of strain. So what we're not doing is adding undue pressure by referring them there. That's actually the end of my presentation. Take any questions?
Thank you very much. Great presentation. A lot of work put in there, I can tell. Just a quick question came to mind. Where we've made big improvements, obviously nothing of concern here. Do we know exactly why and how we've done that? We do. Okay. That's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, you know. Anybody got any questions or comments? Stephen?
We have no idea how we make the improvements. It's just like magic. It just happens. No, we are absolutely very clear about the things that we improve, and I do think it's reflect. This is a whole system approach. I think the thing that we feel proud about as a Hounslow system is this is all of us working together. It's not always all very comfortable sometimes. We do occasionally disagree. Sheena and I will disagree. We will disagree around the table, but actually what comes out of that is effective working. We're very clear about where we need to be. And I think that it's evident in the work we've done. I would particularly, and I will take this opportunity, reflect on a colleague who's no longer with us, Chris Richards, who is employed by previously HRCH and previously thereafter West London Trust, and was the discharge lead coordinator on Discharge Hub. Chris sat amongst all of us in the middle of all of this, seeking to make this happen. And to be honest, her impact, I think, was significant in making the mechanisms. And unfortunately, Chris passed away about 6 weeks ago. Myself and Manjinder, we did put our bridging service forward for a health service journal award, and the 3 of us would have gone to that. Chris wasn't able to join us, but Manjinder and I went and did the presentation on this and are hopeful that that landed well, and I think it did with the judges, and hopefully will be recognised for it. If not, we still think we're doing a good thing here. And there is still scope for us to do a little bit more. And I think picking up in the conversation we had, the front door is a bit that I think we're all itching to get at, because this is all about the back end of West Mids, and we'd like to get in at the front end, but resources, this is all funded through the BCF. It's all within a financial envelope. The demand is there, but it's finding the capacity and the financing stability to focus at this, which I think at the front door, but we know there is a need, and we have stretched it a little, and we'll continue to stretch it into some of the front door stuff. And again, I think to recognise a colleague, Sanjay, who's a medical director at West Mids, is an absolute, I was going to say sweetheart, that's not the appropriate word. Now in the public domain, I've used that word. But Sanjay, having come on board as a medical director, has been an absolute boon, because we get that clinical leadership inside the hospital, which I think we didn't have in essence before, and it is really helpful in terms of getting under why people are potentially delayed, or why we're getting recurring and repeat presentations, and what the clinical needs are, and a really strong and open conversation about how we address that. So in his absence, I think it's a bit of a thank you to Sanjay, because he does stick with it. He's really passionate about people being out of the hospital, even though he's the medical director for the hospital, and actually that happening in a really good way. So it's all a positive to this joint work. I think this is really effective stuff. And I don't often stand and crow about what we do, but I do feel on behalf of all of us, we need to be proud about what we've achieved here.
Sorry, I was just going to agree with what Stephen said, but also lots of people to thank, but also a big thank you to the lovely lady that's sitting next to me, because she does quite a lot of the work here as well. The only other thing to say is really that we are seeing complexity in our pathway ones nationally across the whole system. So I think that's probably an area that we will need to look at as you know, in the same way that you're looking at housing and all the rest of it. There is a growing complexity around all the pathways, I would say, which is making it harder, everything harder. So that sort of complexity and the greater need is just going to get bigger, I think.
Thank you. So given what we've heard today, all the positive things, I am assuming you're happy to sign off. Yeah, the board is happy, yeah, to sign off the, is it quarterly one? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, then swiftly moving on to our next agenda item, which is going to be Martin, and he's going to share again the Q1 performance and updates on the projects which are within the health and wellbeing strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Sterling and Claire are going to take control from here on.
Thank you. I'll cover it today, and Claire can cover the next meeting. So there's quite a few updates across all of the areas across the health and wellbeing strategy, and have been ragged against green, amber, and red. I wanted to flag three really positive activities which are starting in Q1, or to recognise. The first one links to the Start Well item 1 on the document, which talks about maternal health, but also one of the key issues we see in the health and wellbeing strategy is that when children arrive at reception, the levels of obesity are extremely high, and we want to tackle something to tackle that. So the Healthy Hounslow service has adapted its function for children under 3, and they've developed a maternity pathway. So 3 workshops will be delivered every year, working on healthy diet, healthy behaviours, parenting, to help influence the choices of which parents are making prior to entering school and having those interventions, which we typically don't get to do. So that's a really welcomed change to the service. So there's both generalist training for families, but also for clinicians and the wider health system like Family Hub. So we're thinking about opportunities like the immunization appointments and where families are already integrating into the system and taking up those opportunities to refer them to these 3 workshops. So that's really positive. The second one I wanted to point to is item 4, which refers back to the relationship across the system around ED attendances and admissions, and goes back to, I think, Claire's point around 0 to 4. There's a lot of work that's really come together the last year around 0 to 4 admissions, particularly those which are avoidable, and we see a high number. Hounslow has the highest attendance rate for 0 to 4 A&E attendances. There's been some really positive work both around information provided to parents through the Healthier Together website. We've had some agreements on how we get that information presented across the system, of which we now have really strong agreement between the hospital, primary care, and the providers, but also the addition of primary care offering additional appointments, 750 appointments a month over the next few months, after hours from 5:30, to enable those families who are calling 111 or their GPs to get the care exactly where it's needed by their GP, not going to A&E, and that's both beneficial for us as a system, but also for that family, because it's not really enjoyable to be going to A&E, and so it's much better that they're being seen in the community by primary care. The final one is not something delivered locally, but I thought it was really good to flag. It's item 8, which talks about the late diagnosis of cancer. So we've really welcomed the expansion this year of the bowel cancer screening being lowered to 50. This enables much earlier diagnosis and better treatment for that cancer screening. Hounslow has the highest uptake at a North West London level. That has reduced over the last 4 months, but that's because the eligibility and the denominator has increased, because we have a group of a population from 50 to 60 which have not previously been invited. So we expect to see that will have good coverage, but it's a really welcomed addition from NHS England, which we will see hopefully impact that key primary outcome. So those are the 3 I wanted to highlight in terms of good news. There's all the other actions are feeding into various different work streams where they are amber or red for improvement or progress. So I thought those were the 3 that we wanted to bring today.
Peter.
Chair, thank you very much indeed. I refer to page 73. This is about the last phase of life. This has been amber. Don't think it's been green for a while, and we know the challenges is because it's trying to get agreement across the integrated system to do various work. It's moved to red. We're all fully aware of the North West London initiative, but that only deals with the real specialist group. So it's a fairly small cohort, really. And I wonder if Martin could sort of allude to us that we've now moved into red, and what we are doing locally with our integrated system to make those improvements we've all been wishing for.
Yeah, thank you for the question. A great question. I think, Martin, you've got some.
So Peter, thank you, because we know the system well. I said to Sterling, don't mention the red one because Peter will ask me a question on it. So you're absolutely right. And Peter and I work very closely together on end of life care. So there are 2 projects. There is the North West London implementing complex a new offer for end of life care. That has stalled at times. The funding wasn't agreed, but that project is now moving forward. So I think that should move to actually green, Peter. The area where, as you know, we are still struggling is the area where does our system, so Stephen will jump in, Claire, where we regularly have workshops where we look at patients who have probably died in West Mid Hospital or end up in West Mid Hospital far too often, and we just can't work out why the system isn't working better together. So we had a workshop probably 3 months ago where we talked about that. We've had follow-up meetings, and Sanjay is having another workshop in West Mid in next month or so to take that work forward again. So I think it's red because we are really challenging on ourselves that we believe that the right place for people in Hounslow to die is in their place of choice, and we still feel too many people are ending up in West Mid. I don't think, when I saw that, I was like, I don't really think that is red because we're all doing the efforts. There isn't a blocker in place. So I do think we need to review why that really is red. But my strong feeling is we're all engaged, we're doing the work, but still there are too many cases where people do end up in West Mid when they probably shouldn't.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. And obviously, we take that forward in terms of your strategic working group, which I'm a member of, etc. But of course, one of the things that we've been trying to do is get agreement across the different partners to be able to fund or resource or to be able to do some of that work. And that, I think, has been the longer term challenge that we're facing. And we're seeing it day in, day out, still being a problem, especially for the hospital and people who are dying not in the place of their choosing.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And I think, funding has arrived here quite a few times today. Our Chief Executive, Mandy Skinner, is at a North West London meeting with the new ICB chair today. So, long term, the 10-year plan and everything, we need to think about how we fund and do more preventative and system work. And as we've also mentioned, we've got the new pilot in Hounslow. We're doing lots of integrated work. So I think there are two things. We'd all agree there's a shortage of money in the system, and we aren't finding the money to fund all of end of life at the moment. But I think, and Steve may want to come in, there are also times where we think as a system we could work better together. And I still think in the end of life area, we still think there are things that we are learning where we can improve. And your group and the residents that attend that really help us on that journey. So I think we do all hold ourselves to account. It is an area we still need to improve, not just because of money, but system working.
Okay, thank you. So, any other questions? Or Stephen?
Martin was right that I can't help myself come in here. I pick up the bit that Martin said there, which is there isn't enough money, but actually it's about what we can do different. And I do have to say, I think the challenge here is not money. It's about how we do things differently. And it's a little bit about, we've had a number of conversations, and myself and Manjinder had a conversation with Sanjay last week about the workshop. This is fundamentally, and I think we need to step away from putting the end of life label on it, because that automatically draws us to being something different from the journey of life. And what we're dealing with in the main, in the conversation we've had now at West Mids a number of times, are generally older people who are frail, who at some point are likely to die. And we get a bit hit up on the end of life about it's 12 months, the end of date, and you have an end of life plan. The reality is the vast majority of 80 and 90-year-olds who are frail and are in receipt of support from their GP practice and probably had one A&E admission are likely to die at some point. And we need to start taking a more inclusive approach to helping them plan for the end of their life rather than saying it's an end of life approach. Because at what point, and I think that's the conversation we've had with colleagues in West Mids, is how many times does that person need to come back to West Mids for us to have a sensible conversation about if they present the same, is West Mids the right place for them to go? Or are we just actually managing in the most humane way the end of their life? And there's a whole load of stuff in there socially and family orientated about people's expectations. So the group we do need to tackle, first of all, are those who are resident in our nursing and residential homes, who are being conveyed to West Mids to die. That does not make sense. But I don't think we're brave enough in the system to have brave conversations about when you do not go through an ambulance to West Mids, where you stay. But what we've got to guarantee families and individuals is that that death will be a good one. And there's a whole load of fears about dying outside hospital. There's no fears about dying in hospital, but I think we'd all probably agree it's not the best place to die. So we need to do some of that work, which is not end of life, because we get a little bit too het up with the end of life stuff, which is just about how do you prepare people who are frail for, at some point, their conditions, 5, 6 comorbid conditions, one of those conditions, or all combination of them, is going to result in their death. And the last place they want to be is in West Mids in November, when it's chock-a-block, waiting for a bed on a medical ward, where we could probably help to enable that death at home or in a residential home in a better way. So I think that's what we're probably seeking to do in the conversation with West Mids colleagues. And I think very little of that is more money. It's just about doing things differently. But that's a difficult bit for all of us, because we have all these standing operating procedures that say certain things must happen. So we've got to change that a wee bit. And part of the project that Ben Collins is leading for us, the Hounslow Care Together, gives us an opportunity to have that conversation. I think that's where we've got to tie it in.
Yeah, so I would agree. It is about the conversations that are held with the individual and their families, so that everybody understands that this is a journey. No one knows how long the journey is, but there is a journey. And so this actual target here is talking actually about the people supported to have the conversation. So in some ways, what's been put in as the latest update doesn't actually really relate to what the item is we're trying to achieve. And so it is about everybody in the system being able to start to have those conversations and then them being formalised by whoever is the person that needs to be doing that. And I think if that is our focus for a period of time, that hopefully will show more results than we've managed to achieve to date.
Obviously more work to be done in the area, but I can completely agree with both you and Stephen. I'm thinking of the time, so if I have got any more, oh, Stephen has, yeah.
At the opposite end of the age spectrum, the one that isn't here, which is amber, which I just have to alert again, is the one round about readiness for school. And the reason I alert that one is that within the fairer funding formula 2.0 arranged discussions that are happening with government for the funding of local government, part of that is about having localized targets. One of the targets that has popped up is actually global development for young children. It's the same thing. And actually they're suggesting incredibly stretching targets for local systems, because quite rightly, government recognises that if you aren't making good global development between 0 to 4, the impact on your life further down the line is long term. But actually, I think we do need to revisit this. And I would suggest, Chair, that probably once we get a better understanding of that in the next quarter, possibly a health and wellbeing board in the new year, we maybe need to focus a little bit on this again as a partnership to think, and it picks up the high presentations, as Sterling says, A&E for paediatrics, etc., etc., etc. So it might be worth us just spending a bit of time in the new year having a discussion about what we're all doing here, because it's an important area that we still haven't made much of a movement locally on.
Okay, so I think that's going to be an action for the board, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Okie dokie. In that case, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 8. And it's Kasturi, you're going to be presenting it. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I'll hand over to you.
Okey-doke. Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. So I'm here today to give you a brief update on the State of the Borough report, which has been put together by the Policy and Insight team. So as you may all know, this is the Council's annual strategic assessment of life in Hounslow, over looking at a whole bunch of different topics. Usually I would have some visuals to show you and entice you with, but I will be giving you a verbal update today, so I'll do my best to keep you all engaged. This report goes beyond the formal services, so it draws on the latest data that we have to explore wider social, economic and environmental factors that essentially shape how residents experience the borough. So I've just picked out a selection of topics that I thought would be interesting to talk today in terms of wider determinants of health and well-being, playing a role in impacting and shaping where health and well-being intersects within Hounslow. The full report is available on the Hounslow Data Hub, so that's stats.hounslow.gov.uk, and there's a whole load of data and reports, bespoke reports that we've put together if anyone is interested. So I thought I'd start off with a bit on Hounslow's population profile. So Hounslow is a borough with a lot of population movement, and this can affect a number of things. It can be community cohesion, continuity of care, service demand, unpredictability, which makes it even more important for us to be responsive to the changing demographic within the borough. So at the moment, we're home to almost 300,000 residents speaking 192 different languages. And within that, there's a noticeable concentration of residents that we're now seeing in their early 20s to the late 40s, and a relatively smaller proportion of children. 80% of the children in Hounslow have at least one parent born outside the UK, and this highlights the role of international migration that is shaping our demographic landscape. As you already know, like much of London and England, we are seeing declining birth rates and also an aging population, even as overall numbers of the total population grows, and again, driven by international migration. So this is helping to offset the effects of lower birth rates, but the demographic shift also brings its own challenges. So this can be around carer burden, economic sustainability, healthcare demand, all with an aging population. So understanding the relationship and interplay between both migration and demographic sustainability is very critical for planning at both local and national levels. Having looked at the data, by 2050, nearly 1 in 5 of our residents will be 65 plus, with many living longer, but in more years of poorer health. And as the current working age population transitions into retirement, there will be a smaller cohort entering the labour market who will then struggle to support the demands of an ageing society. So that's just something to be aware of, and being aware to the change in that demographic landscape we're seeing. In terms of Hounslow's jobs and economy, so financial security is a key driver of well-being. A strong economy is not just helping our residents' bank accounts, it also elevates their quality of life. And while Hounslow's pupils are performing well academically, our median wage is among the lowest in London, and too many residents are relying on both a combination of welfare and work to get by. Since 2015, real wages in Hounslow have declined. But this has remained relatively stagnant in London and England overall, so quite specific to Hounslow. And this means that our residents are earning more on paper, but they can afford less. So as a result, residents are cutting back on how much is spent on essentials. That can be childcare, heating, food, and that's something that is contributing to exacerbating the health inequalities that we're seeing. There's also a gap between the resident earnings. So average resident earnings are around 33,500, and job salaries within the borough are around 38,600 on average. So we're seeing a difference of over 5,000 between both, and this is wider than what we're seeing across London. And with that comes the middle squeeze, which is also evident in the borough, where median earners are having the smallest income growth all the way since 2002, but the lowest 10% of earners have seen relatively larger increases in their pay. But in London, we're seeing this gross pay increase distributed more evenly. So again, something more specific to Hounslow. Using our CACI data, which we subscribe to, we can see that 1 in 4 households are just getting by financially, and we're seeing higher concentrations in particular areas like Hanworth Village, Heston West, Brentford East, Feltham West, Cranford and Isleworth. And with universal credit claims, this still remains significantly above pre-pandemic levels, pointing to the cost of living struggles that are still going on for residents. So Hounslow has nearly 11,000 residents that are currently claiming either universal credit or job seekers allowance. And what's interesting is that a growing number of these clients are older residents now, so particularly those that are over 50. And this kind of raises questions about older residents facing barriers to work, ill health, availability of flexible jobs. It's a bit of a clear trend that we're seeing now, and I guess one that poses questions about the future of work for residents who might still be almost 20 years away from their state retirement age. In terms of the share of claimants' ages, so the share of claimant ages between 55 and 64 has actually doubled now, whilst the share of claimants of 16 to 24-year-olds now make up a much smaller proportion. So we're seeing almost a third of their previous size. And most of these claimant households are skewed towards the west of the borough, a trend that we're seeing for both unemployed and employed claimants. And we're seeing similarly with mental health related personal independence payment claimants too. The demand for citizen advice services has almost nearly doubled since 2020. And though benefits are remaining the top issue, there has been a rise in housing support and essentials like food banks. So over 1 in 5 citizen advice clients that we're seeing in Hounslow are employed, but they're still seeking help, often for debt, housing, essential costs. And again, it's reflecting the reality that employment is no longer a reliable buffer against financial hardship on its own. Residents are needing more than just employment to keep them going. And now in 2025, we're seeing that the proportion of retired clients, carers, and people with disabilities has grown. And again, pointing to a wider economic vulnerability beyond the market, reinforcing the need for a more broad and inclusive approach to local support services. Another group that we're seeing accounting for a large share within the citizen advised clients is private renters. And this takes me onto housing. So over the past 2 decades, the proportion of residents that own with a mortgage has nearly halved, whilst private renting has more than doubled. So it's now the largest tenure group that we're seeing in Hounslow. And as we see in the rest of London too, there is a fall in home ownership in Hounslow, with younger populations being less likely to own property. Hounslow's affordability ratio is higher than London's average, and this is making home ownership especially difficult for younger residents. So on average in Hounslow, rent is consuming 50% of gross monthly pay, and this is before deductions. So this places Hounslow among one of the least affordable boroughs. And housing insecurity also affects children's education, so leaving a negative impact on educational attainment. So there's been studies where the more frequent a child moves throughout their schooling, this correlates with a lower GCSE pass rate. So it's not just looking at housing, but what other things does that impact? Overcrowding affects nearly 15% of households. So this places Hounslow in the top quartile region. And of those overcrowded households, 84% have at least one person born outside the UK. In terms of infrastructure, housing quality is generally quite good compared to other boroughs and the rest of London. But of course, infrastructure investment is still essential to protect the vulnerable groups from things like climate-related risks. Fuel poverty, another concern. Hounslow does sit mid-range among the London boroughs, but there is again a difference in the levels of risk that we're seeing of fuel poverty across the borough, where we're seeing more high energy costs and low income combinations, more so in the west of the borough. So in Hounslow, 20% of households can be categorized as low income, and 30% of homes are energy inefficient. So these overlapping challenges are especially concentrated in Cranford, Heston, Hanworth, Hounslow Heath. So those are the main topics that I wanted to touch on today. Obviously, these determinants don't operate in isolation. They are all interconnected. They shape the borough's health landscape in different complex ways. The full report does cover more topics. There's things on safety and perception. So within Hounslow's, crime rates are lower, but the fear of crime is much higher than what we're seeing across London. There's information on education in early years. So there's childhood obesity rising, and things on environment and climate change. So yeah, that's a bit of a summary on the state of the borough. It does provide a lens for cross-sector collaboration. Health services can't address all of these challenges alone, but there needs to be coordinated action across different sectors, whether that's housing, employment, planning. The State of the Borough is an interactive dashboard, and it is published on the Hounslow Data Hub, as I had mentioned. So please do use the tool, explore deeper insights. There's a lot more. It's a very chunky report. So enjoy exploring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a really good report, actually, and it gives you a really lovely story of the borough. And you can go to, it's on the hub, it's a Hounslow Data Hub, isn't it? Yeah. But obviously, I know for us as elected members, it gives us a bit of an idea of where we want to focus in the decision, and helps inform, sort of shapes decision making. Questions, Peter?
Sorry, I appreciate it's on the hub, but for people outside the council where that can be a little bit more of a challenge, and to really update people of some of the important changes you're alluding to in that assessment, is there going to be a formal document that people can refer to and see?
The Hounslow Data Hub is a publicly accessible website. So as long as the link is shared, anyone can view the report and use it.
Are you going to publish a report?
It's published on the Hounslow Data Hub.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was agreed at Borough Council, so it's been. Any other questions, comments, Steve?
I can't help myself. I'm going to steer absolutely clear of my two other favourite subjects, but I haven't talked about them for a long time, which is childhood obesity and dental, and I'll just park them as statements because we have not addressed those in terms of the wider determinants of health and what we're all doing. But I'm not going to indulge in those. I think the one, because it's possibly closer to home, and the one I think is one that we somewhat forget, and I think it's maybe about having to go back to Paul and get a little bit more nuanced information, is the impact of the economic situation on people with disabilities, and particularly learning disabilities. And I do occasionally say this, that in my view, we talk about vulnerable groups within our society. People with learning disabilities are one of the most vulnerable groups in our society. I'm not convinced that we address the matters related to early death of people with learning disabilities, and the pandemic came along and kind of took us all away from that in some attention. But overall, the economic impact on people with disabilities in terms of their life chances, their general health, they are probably falling behind the general population at a faster rate. And I think probably we need to have a look at that in terms of a Health and Wellbeing Board about, is that factually true? I certainly know it was factually true in my prior authority, because we used to do a particular focused look at the impact of the social economic situation on people with disabilities and learning disabilities, and they were losing out at a faster rate than the general population. So I would suggest we probably, again, want to have a look at that, to question ourselves as a health and social care and local authority partnership, what can be done. The one that feels much closer to home, because I am in the age group, is the over 50s. So, you know, if the average lifespan is on average between men and women about 80, if the over 50s, you're out of employment, you've got 30 years of life left. And I sit broadly in the middle of that age group of over 50 and retirement at 67, and thinking, I love coming to work. It gives me purpose. It also exhausts me. But actually I have purpose. No, you don't need any more. No more work, Councillor Bath, please. No more work. But actually, if you are in that age group and they have not bounced back, and that is clear from the report, as Kate says, the younger population have generally bounced back, not quite pre-pandemic, but have generally bounced back. But the over 50 situation has just got exponentially much worse in terms of their life chances. And I do think we need to think about that from, again, the general impact on people's health and what that stores up for all of our services. If at age 50 you are out of employment with no chance of getting back into employment, your social, economic and health situation can only but deteriorate, and they generally don't have the same mobility as the under 50s. They're generally tied into local place, so they can't up sticks and go and find a job elsewhere. So again, I think probably as a Health and Wellbeing Board, we need to have a look at that in terms of what needs to be done in the general health and determinants of public health for that group, in terms of, you know, we're all crying out for employees. We've got a rich seam of experienced people and mature people out there who can't get into work. Surely, he says, challenging us and everybody else, we can do something about it. And I think we need to turn our attention to it.
Absolutely right. The other thing that sort of came to mind is, I think early on in your presentation, you were saying that obviously we're going to have a high older population, but in poorer health. Is there anything particular about that which is unique to this borough, or is that just a general state of play for? Because again, it's about trying to focus on things that are very particular to this borough, there might be a particular reason for that. We might need to sort of target work around that.
I need to take a look back into that, and I can let you know. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. And I do advise Peter, go and read it. It's a really interesting read. Okay, so we are now going to be moving on to you actually, Peter. You're going to give us an update, aren't you, on a piece of work that you've been doing with GP practices and you're going to help us how to get an appointment with the GP.
I wish I could, but you'll probably need to point that question in another direction, Chair. What I wanted to do is give you two quick updates, if I may. This is about the Q2 patient experience programme. We have done that work. Q2 is July to September of this year. We've done the report. We submitted it to the commissioners. The commissioners and Mark Jarvis wanted to change some of the formatting of that We are waiting for that final decision, and then we can issue that report. So it's already, the data's done, we've shared it, but we haven't publicly issued it because they're wanting some changes in terms of the formatting, etc. But the headlines, if I can give it to you now, 272 responses from residents regarding their experiences with GP practices across Hounslow. That's above the target that we need to achieve. Appointment accessibility, we asked residents how easy it is to get a GP appointment. 40% said it's very easy to get an appointment. The remaining, of course, 60% said it was okay, or they experienced some difficulties in securing them. We focus specifically about phone access. That's often a question we constantly ask. When asked about the ease of speaking to somebody on the phone at their practice, the findings are consistent with previous quarters. 44% said they found it easy to get through, which is really positive. However, half found it okay or difficult. There are consistent comments coming through, as we are fully aware, and our medical director colleague is fully aware, around mentioning early mornings, especially being very difficult time to get access, and the longer waiting times. And we could talk through all the activity that people have been doing to try and improve that. There's a comment about automated systems, because of course we have that. We got an NHS app where you can book an appointment. We have locally in most of our practices patches, which is that online system. Some residents express concern, and that seems to be consistent. There is some that really like it, work it very well. Some have expressed concern that the automatic booking system, the NHS app and patches, is not working properly. You have to get down into the detail, of course, as whether it is the application that's not working properly, or whether it's the particular practice, the way in which they want to utilize and control and manage the way in which appointments are done. But that is a consistent theme that does come through. And inevitably, we got a group of patients and residents that if you ask, they will prefer to book an appointment through a person rather than through a system. But many people that do use it do like it and finding real benefits in it. So we need to say that. The final point I want to say is something slightly different, and we've mentioned it in the discussion in the meeting. This is the 0 to 4 A&E attendance. We've been asked to do a piece of work to go and interview people who have gone to A&E with a child on 0 to 4 to find out the reasons, but also have they gone to a GP, have they contacted a GP, etc. Because we're opening up additional slots specifically for this cohort, and we want to maximize that. And we facilitated a meeting with the medical director, clinical director at West Mid and the ICB this week, where we unpacked quite a lot of the information that we have already got. Currently, we are preparing that report. We will be publicising that through the Commissioner probably in November, but there's quite a lot of work that everybody is doing it. During our engagement, just as a theme, 98% of parents that went into the hospital at that 0 to 4 had registered their child with a GP practice. So that's really high. That's really good. However, 70% had not seen their GP prior to attending the A&E. 19% reported difficulties in booking or contacting their GP by phone for their child, which might have influenced their decision to go an A&E. This is just an initial thought. We will expand the detail and the data in our report when we issue that. I would predict that would be in sort of early November to help all the medical director and the ICB in terms of this piece of work, so we can maximize the improvements and see what we can do in this area. I submit myself to rigorous and complex questions, and I will do whatever I can to answer them, Chair.
Thank you. So what you're saying is that the first one, the work's been done, but the report's not ready. The second project is has finished, or you're currently working on it?
The first part is the patient experience survey, quarter two. We've done all the work, the report's all done. It's just the finalisation
Bits
through the
and bobs,
commissioners
right.
and some colleagues that wanted some amendments of what data we use in that public report. As soon as we got that, press the button, it will be circulated, etc. So the work is done. That's the headlines of the work.
Yeah.
The second piece, the 0 to 4 piece of work we were commissioned to do by the ICB, we've done the data collection work. We've done all the interviews with the people coming into A&E. We've spoken to all the colleagues across the board. We've now got to pull that together to issue the report.
Okay.
That will be due in November, which will be in the timelines as expected.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions? Comments? I'm looking at you.
Chair, you're looking at me, but I think it's more that if members of the panel have questions, it may be that Peter's best to answer or I'm best to answer. So I'm happy to take questions in partnership with Peter.
Sort of got a question actually, and I guess we'll see it when we get the report. But in terms of those that were having problems getting an appointment with a GP, have you linked whether those were not able to use the app? Could they be sort of elderly or in that group that are not likely to be able to do it digitally? Just wondered.
This is often an issue that comes up, and of course this quarter two report is going to be fairly consistent to other reports. So you've got a whole lot of historical data there. There is a cohort of people that do not like to use those applications. They would prefer to use a phone. They would prefer to speak to a person. There's some people that will be challenged, of course, to do that. And quite a lot of work has gone on at different PCN level to help educate, inform communities, digital skills to upgrade them. And specifically, work has gone on at PCN level to say, how can we help people get on board the NHS app, i.e., because you've got to register, you've got to have your NHS number. Once you've done that, then how do you navigate it? There's quite a lot of work that have been going on across most of the PCNs in this area. That's always going to be needed. But if you look at the Ofcom report of 2023, which broadly looks at national data about digital capabilities, you will find there are members of our community that are very challenged to use digital services. That's pretty consistent. You know, there are a group of about 23 in certain social economic groups that do struggle. So it's not about the NHS. That's about online digital services. People can struggle, and that is a challenge that we should not forget about.
Sorry, Councillor, but some more general comments on the theme of access. So North West London has got an access programme that is active now. A couple of the KPIs in there. So one is around the telephones being answered in under 10 minutes. I would love for that to be faster, but even that is a challenge because there are particular pinch points of the day, as we already mentioned, 8 o'clock in the morning. If you could guarantee me to travel down the M25 in under 10 minutes at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd love to see a solution for that. Some things you can try, but it would take a phenomenal amount of resource to deliver. You know, there are some things we have to acknowledge are pinch points, and that will always be a challenge. Another KPI around online submissions is that patients will get responses to their online submissions within 24 hours, because I think that's a really important thing. You want to know that your information has not gone into a black hole, and then you get a prompt response. And the PCN, primary care networks, are also developing their bespoke access plan to try and reflect, as Peter's given a really good explanation, there is variation in how people want access delivered. So the PCNs are developing their bespoke plans along those lines. What I for anybody who's viewing this from home, or people who are around the panel are registered with a GP, I would encourage you to access the GP survey, because actually, when I looked into those results, which do surveys in different ways, you get different results. That was a national impartial survey. I was actually encouraged by a lot of the responses, but with any survey, there would be variation. So look, please do access your GP practice survey. Do look at other services which are within your area and see, have you found the best service that fits your needs? Because not all GP practices are designed to be the same. There may be more digitally savvy ones, or there may be ones which are more about walking in or using the telephone and see if you can find the right fit for yourself. Of course, we should all meet a good standard, but there is variation out there that might help residents get to the right service for them.
I do actually have a question for you, it's interesting about the GP survey. I think that's good to sort of plug that. With all of these universal care plans and things that are coming into force, which obviously is encouraging people to use their apps more, which is great. But for those that could be using them, it would be beneficial, but don't. Is there going to be any support? Because I know that health protection practitioners are really busy. So I'm just wondering, because obviously, in principle, I think it's a really great idea. I'm just trying to understand how it's going to work in practice. I don't even know. Is it live? No?
The UCP?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the UCP has been live for for a little while, but before you may have heard words like coordinate my care, but it was felt that system was not meeting our needs. So we moved forward to the UCP, the new UCP, which is Pan London. For any resident, every resident, whether you can use a digital tool, the UCP is available, because actually a physician or anybody who has the access rights to the UCP, who's been trained to use it, should be able to enter data onto your UCP for you in discussion with you. So actually, it's primarily, probably the vast majority of entry onto the UCP is done by a trained professional. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Councillor Barth. There is a patient element where you can enter stuff onto your UCP, but I believe there is a step that it is checked by a professional before it's turned into a formal plan, because we can't ask our patients to be medical professionals. We need to make sure that their suggestions are appropriate and right, and so we can do that. In terms of other initiatives, there have been initiatives to get other professionals to go into. I think Marie Curie did a project with some care homes to try and increase the uptake of UCPs. But it comes down to what you said. You said, who's got the time to do this? I'm going to say something awkward, and I'm saying no one has sufficient time to do this really, really well. And in my practice, when the difficulty around becoming older and getting into that phase, and sorry, Steve, don't shout at me for saying end of life phase, is that to do that really well and to have that conversation probably takes about an hour, maybe longer, to provide that full holistic assessment. For a general practitioner, I have to trade 1 hour for 6 appointments. So, and you might say, well, what about after clinic, the gap in the day? That's where all the other work happens. So that's why I think there's an issue around how are we making time to have that conversation? How are we getting those good quality care plans? And how do we make that happen? And it is about the time, because we've actually even tried to financially incentivize people to do UCPs, but doing a UCP and it being good quality and doing a UCP just to say tick a box that you've done it are two very different things. So, and I think one of the other reasons why people end up going into the West Mid is that I think with their end of life experience, I as a GP, in a year, I might have one patient who goes through an end of life process. For that family, that might be the only process they go through for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So relatives are not experts in end of life. And no matter how much you support them, teach them what to expect, whatever, when their relative becomes more sick and they think they're dying and they don't do something, they get scared and they call for help. So I think that whatever we do in our linked up approach, it's going to be about who's got the time to support the families to keep their relatives at home, and that's going to be the challenge for the system. I don't have the answer, but looking forward to working with all partners around the table to try to get to the answer.
Thank you. Stephen.
I'm not going to say anything about end of life. I think just to go back to Peter's two things, I think we need to recognise we're on a digital journey with the population and the patient group. So I would say, as a member of the community and a patient, the NHS app functionality has just got a lot better in the last couple of years. When I first downloaded it, probably 5 years ago, it was unbelievably clunky. but in the last year or two, it's got better. And I think the NHS has probably identified that you've got to make the functionality work for people. I mean, I still can't quite work out the NHS when I go to my GP practice for a blood test, which of the 5 types of blood tests I've got to click, and I just click one. And when I get there, I say it's not actually that one, it's the other one. So there's a little bit about functionality. I do think there is a group, there is a group probably of 70 to 80-year-olds who are never going to get digital. And I think we do need to we will continue, no doubt, in GP practices with phone access and whatever, and other people accessing. But in 5 years' time, I will be retired probably, and one of the old people. And I've currently got 3 devices sitting on one in front of me, 2 in my pockets. So the NHS digital journey will improve with the population. It'll just get a bit better. But there are some groups who, because of their capabilities, won't, and they will always have to make room for them, I think. I think on the 0 to 4, I think what will be really interesting coming out is the drivers. So I think interesting when you said 74% hadn't got in touch with the GP practice before they tipped up at A&E. So understanding the drivers, I think, because I think many of the drivers are social economic, they're not higher clinical risk. They're parents who are anxious because a child's got a bit of a fever and they don't have the network round about them. And the easiest place to go is that lovely shiny door that Sheena opens up and makes available 24 hours a day, mostly probably after school. Because again, I'd be interested in the work that we're doing to understand when the peak capacity is, and I would not be surprised if it's after the school gates close.
Thank you. Yes, Peter?
Yeah, I haven't unpacked the work that we've been doing on this, the 0 to 4, and I think we need to spend some time to look at that. But of course, then what happens when you're 5, 6, 7? It's still exactly the same problem. You have a child ill at that age, just coming from school, and that's when they're suddenly wanting to get access to a GP. And at the moment, we've got these additional appointments, but it's for 0 to 4. It's not for the 5-year-old. It's not for the 6-year-old. So that's part of the challenge. And the second point about the digital uptake is, yes, you're right, but I think there is a great danger. We say the problem is with the elderly. No, I think the other point that we've got to go back to, and that's some of the work that we've done on the needs, is where can you get access? You've got to be able to have a phone, a SIM card, you're paying a monthly fee, you're paying, even if it's a data only, it's still a monthly charge. And if you're at home, you're going to have a Wi-Fi and you've got to have access to a Wi-Fi. So either you're in a home that has difficulty getting access, or you're paying a broadband. And that's quite a challenge in the financial discussion that we had earlier. So there is a group of people that are also challenged to be able to get the digital services and the capability that they might need. We won't need to unpack all of that, but it is wider than just because you're old.
I think we sort of running out of time, but I will take your, that'll be the last, if that's okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to reassure that there's been a lot of enthusiasm around the 0 to 4 approach with education and the appointments. We're learning all the time. We've already had feedback from West Mids and their paediatric department. We've got ongoing data support from the public health team. This is iteration 1 of that program, but we're following the data and we're following the feedback. And one of those feedbacks was, why does my child stop at the age of 4? So, we're still trying to get it. We're still trying to get it right. We know there's lots of demand. We've seen approximately at this point 700 additional children in the 0 to 4 hubs that would have not been accommodated in primary care. So we're on the right track, but we'll learn from all the colleagues and we'll try and make it better. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Peter, and we look forward to sort of more information around what's going on underneath. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. I haven't had any other business brought to my attention, so I will then just close this meeting and thank everybody for coming. I will also take the opportunity to remind you that our next meeting is on the 13th of January, but the start time is later at 5:30. So just to pre-warn you of that, but obviously you will get formal notice of that. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening all.